The council chamber floated in silence above the blue waters of. Inside the massive dome, representatives from 40 different species sat in their designated sections. Stood at the center platform, his hands steady as he held the data pad. He had practiced this presentation for 3 months. Every word, every gesture, every number had been checked and rechecked. Ambassador Minu sat in the human delegation area, watching his with quiet pride. Was the best engineer Earth had produced in decades. If anyone could convince the Galactic Council to approve humanity's infrastructure proposal, it was him. His voice was calm and clear. The relay network we propose will connect 73 isolated colony worlds. Current jump drive technology requires 2 weeks to reach these locations. Our system will reduce that to 3 days. The energy cost will be 40% lower than existing methods. He brought up holographic displays showing the technical specifications. The math was solid. The engineering was practical. Humanity had worked on this for 5 years, pouring resources and talent into something that would help everyone, not just humans. Princess Nara of the Empire sat in the highest tier of the chamber. Her skin had a crystalline quality that reflected the light in rainbow patterns. She looked young because she was young, only 19 years old by human standards, but the lived for centuries, and she had been educated by the finest minds in the galaxy. She was considered a genius in quantum sciences, having published 3 revolutionary papers before her 15th birthday. She had been quiet during his entire presentation, her face showing neither interest nor boredom. Now, as he finished and asked for questions, she leaned forward. The chamber fell silent. When a princess spoke, everyone listened. "May I offer some observations?" Her voice was musical, almost pleasant. Nodded, "Of course, Your Highness." Nara stood and her movements were graceful. She walked down to the center platform, her advisors following with data pads. Lord, the High Chancellor, looked uncomfortable but said nothing. "This is adorable," Nara began and felt the first hint of unease. "Truly, humanity's effort here is commendable. You've been in space for what, 300 years? And you've already grasped basic relay theory. That's impressive for such a young species." She pulled up his technical specifications and began marking sections in red. "However, there are fundamental flaws in your approach. You're using linear particle acceleration here, which any first-year student in our universities would recognize as inefficient. The energy distribution model assumes stable quantum states that simply don't exist in deep space. And this relay architecture," she zoomed in on his network design. "It's like watching children stack blocks and call it architecture." Polite laughter rippled through the chamber. Not cruel laughter, but the kind that adults make when a child says something naive. Stood very still, his expression unchanged. Nara continued, warming to her subject. "The core problem is that you're approaching quantum mechanics like it's classical physics. You're 3 centuries into and still thinking in Newtonian terms. My people were building stable wormholes before your planet had invented writing. We've had 50,000 years to perfect these technologies. Perhaps, and I mean this kindly, humanity should focus on simpler endeavors for now. Agriculture, perhaps. Mining. Things that don't require understanding the fundamental forces of the universe." More laughter. The representative clicked his mandibles in amusement. The delegation nodded in agreement. Even some of humanity's allies looked away, embarrassed. Lord touched Nara's arm gently. "Your Highness, perhaps." She pulled away, not unkindly. "I'm helping them understand, Chancellor. It's cruel to let them continue thinking they're ready for projects of this scale when they clearly need more time to develop. Another millennium or 2 of study, and perhaps then they'll understand the concepts we mastered before Earth's sun finished forming." Looked at her directly for the first time. His face showed nothing. No anger, no shame, no hurt. Just a calm, empty expression that gave away nothing at all. Nara met his eyes. "Do you understand what I'm saying? This isn't about being mean. This is about reality. Your species is brilliant for its age. You've accomplished remarkable things, but you're still infants on the galactic stage. There's no shame in that. It's simply fact. The chamber waited for response. Would he argue, defend his work, get angry? Ambassador Minu half rose from his seat, ready to intervene if needed. Carefully collected his data pad and the physical copies of his presentation. He organized them neatly, taking his time. Then he looked at Princess Nara and gave a small, polite bow. "Thank you for your time, Your Highness. Thank you all for listening." That was it. No argument, no defense, no anger. He simply turned and walked toward the exit. His footsteps echoed in the silent chamber. Ambassador Minu stood quickly. "Council members, if we could perhaps continue this discussion," but was already gone. The doors closed behind him with a soft hiss. Nara watched him leave, a slight frown on her face. She had expected pushback, argument, something. The empty acceptance was strange. She shrugged and returned to her seat. "I recommend the council reject the human proposal and suggest they submit something more suitable to their current level of development in a few years." The vote was quick. The proposal was rejected by a margin of 38-2. Only the Empire abstained, and that was more out of politeness than anything else. That evening, Ambassador Minu found in his quarters, packing. The small room was neat and organized, just like everything else about the engineer. His clothes were folded precisely. His equipment was already boxed and labeled. "Wait, don't do anything hasty." "Didn't stop packing. I'm resigning from the diplomatic corps, sir. My letter is already submitted." "Because of what happened today, because some arrogant princess." "She wasn't wrong." His voice was calm. "We are young, we do have a lot to learn. She was absolutely right about that. But your design was sound." "Yes," closed a box and sealed it. "It was, but that doesn't matter right now. The council isn't ready to hear from humanity, not yet." Minu sat down heavily. "So you're just giving up?" Turned and looked at his mentor. There was something in his eyes that Minu had never seen before. Not anger, not defeat. Something else entirely. "I'm not giving up, sir. I'm just done trying to convince them. There's a difference." "Where will you go?" "The frontier. There are people there doing actual work instead of talking about it. I can be useful there." Minu tried several more times to change his mind, but was done with the conversation. He had a ship to catch in the morning, a freight hauler heading to the outer colonies. By the time the sun rose over oceans, was gone. Princess Nara slept well that night, pleased with herself for providing honest guidance to a struggling species. She had already forgotten the quiet human's name. 6 months passed like water through open fingers. Princess Nara turned 20 in a celebration that lasted 3 days across the. Dignitaries from every major empire attended. She gave speeches about unity and progress. She accepted her formal title as Crown Princess. The galaxy watched and approved. Humanity's rejected proposal was forgotten. The council moved on to other matters. Trade agreements were signed. Border disputes were mediated. The great machine of galactic politics continued turning, and humans remained a minor footnote in its vast workings. But in the frontier, in the lawless regions where human colonies barely survived on harsh worlds, something was happening. Captain's freight hauler, the steady hand, pulled into the orbital station above Gansu 4. The old captain had been running cargo routes for 30 years, and he had seen plenty of strange things. But the quiet human who had bought passage 6 months ago was among the strangest. Had spent the entire journey reading, calculating, and occasionally asking about frontier settlements. He never complained about the cramped quarters or the recycled food. He just worked, day after day, filling notebooks with equations and diagrams. "This is your stop," said as they docked. "Nothing here but rock and regret. You sure about this?" Looked out at the barren moon below. Gansu 4 had been claimed by humanity during the expansion period, but no one had bothered developing it. No atmosphere, no resources worth mining, no strategic value, just empty space that happened to have a human flag on it. I'm sure, thank you for the passage, Captain. Watched him go, shaking his head. Another idealist heading to nowhere. He'd probably be back in a month, broke and broken. The frontier did that to people. But didn't come back. Instead, he sent messages. Carefully worded, specific messages to very specific people. Received hers while replacing a burned-out plasma coupling in the mining station's reactor. She was covered in grease and exhaustion. 3 years ago, she had been Dr. Park, youngest physics doctorate from New Seoul University. Her dissertation on nonlinear quantum field interactions had been brilliant, revolutionary even. It had also been rejected by every major research institution in human space. Too theoretical, they said, too impractical. And when she tried to present it to the Galactic Science Council, she had been dismissed even more rudely than a young human woman with wild theories. The alien scientists had barely pretended to listen. So now she fixed reactors for miners who couldn't even pronounce quantum correctly. The message was short. Your dissertation was right, I can prove it, interested. It included coordinates and a guarantee of funding. Read it 3 times, then put in her resignation. Got her message while welding a cracked fuel line on a transport ship that should have been scrapped years ago. She was 24 and had been hopping from job to job across the frontier since she was 18. She had a natural gift for engineering, the kind of instinct that couldn't be taught. She could hear what was wrong with an engine just by listening to it run. But no one wanted to hire a young woman with no formal education and no connections. So she worked whatever jobs she could find, fixing other people's problems for barely enough to eat. His message said, I saw your repair work on the station at Helios 3, elegant solution. I need someone who thinks like you, interested. Stared at the message for a long time. It was probably too good to be true. It was probably a scam. But she was tired of fixing ships that would just break again, tired of being invisible. She sent back one word, yes. They came one by one over the next few months. A dozen humans, all brilliant in different ways, all overlooked or dismissed. A materials scientist who had been laughed out of a conference for suggesting a new approach to alloy construction. A mathematician whose proofs were called interesting but useless by his professors. A programmer who thought in ways that made traditional AI experts uncomfortable. Each of them received the same message from, I believe you, come help me prove it. On Gansu 4, they built a small base in the moon's rocky surface. Nothing fancy, just life support, workspaces, and equipment bought cheaply from settlements selling off old gear. Everything was practical, efficient, minimal. Gathered them in the common area on the first day everyone had arrived. They looked at him expectantly, waiting for some grand speech or explanation. Thank you all for coming. I know you've taken risks getting here, so I'll be direct. We're going to build something that will change everything. Not because we want revenge on the people who dismissed us, not because we want to prove we're better, but because we can and because it needs to exist. Raised her hand. What are we building? A gate. A stable wormhole generator that requires a fraction of the energy and materials of anything currently in use. It will make instant travel between distant points not just possible, but practical. Silence, then someone laughed nervously. That's impossible, the energy requirements alone are impossible using conventional approaches, yes. But Doctor's theories on nonlinear field interactions suggest another way. And instinct for structural efficiency can solve the material stress problems. Every person here brings something essential that the established institutions couldn't see the value in. He brought up holographic displays showing the basic concept. It was insane. It was brilliant. It used principles of physics that most scientists consider dead ends or irrelevant curiosities. It will take about 18 months of constant work. We'll have setbacks. We'll hit problems we can't immediately solve. We might fail completely, but if we succeed, we'll change everything about how the galaxy moves and connects. A materials scientist named spoke up, and if we fail, we'll be even more of a joke than we already are. Shook his head. No, if we fail, we'll have tried something incredible together. That's already more than most people ever do, and I don't believe we'll fail. They started that day, led the theoretical team, translating her equations into practical applications, designed the physical architecture, the massive ring structure that would house the field generators. Others tackled power systems, quantum computing requirements, safety protocols, and 1,000 other problems. Supply ships came and went, bringing materials and equipment. Captain, curious despite himself, started making regular runs. He saw the structure growing on the moon's surface but couldn't figure out what it was. Neither could anyone else. His team was careful about what information left the base. Ambassador Minyu received occasional messages from, brief updates that said almost nothing. Work continues. We're making progress. Don't worry about us. Minyu did worry. He had defended to his superiors, who thought the young engineer had embarrassed humanity by walking out. He had tried to maintain support for the projects had started before leaving, but without drive and vision, everything had stalled. "What are you doing out there?" Minyu sent back. The reply was simple, not revenge proof. On Princess Nara continued her work. She published another paper on quantum computational theory. She advised the council on technical matters. She was respected, admired, considered one of the minds of her generation across all species. She never thought about the human engineer who had walked away from her criticism. Why would she? She had been right. The human proposal had been flawed. She had done them a favor by being honest. If anything, they should thank her for the learning opportunity. In the frontier, on that barren moon, the structure grew. A ring 10 kilometers in diameter, embedded with technology that combined theory and practice in ways no one had attempted before. It hummed with power that came from fusion reactors buried deep in the moon's crust. Stood before it one evening alone. Found him there, staring up at the incomplete frame. "Having doubts?" she asked. "No, just thinking about what happens after, when it works." "You mean if it works?" "When," his voice was certain. "It will work because it has to work, because the galaxy needs it to work even if they don't know it yet." Stood beside him looking at what they had built together. "Are you going to tell them about the princess, about why you really left?" "There's nothing to tell. She was a teenager doing what she thought was right based on what she had been taught. I'm not doing this because of her. I'm doing this despite her never mattering at all." 3 more months of work. Testing, adjustments, recalculations, and one scary moment when a power coupling nearly exploded. But they fixed it, improved it, made it better. Finally stood in the common area again and looked at his tired, brilliant team. "It's ready. Tomorrow we tell the galaxy what we've built. Then we show them it works." The invitation went out through every official channel humanity had access to. The message was simple and direct. Humanity invites representatives of all spacefaring species to observe a demonstration of new transportation technology. Coordinates attached. Date, 14 days from now. No prior registration required. All are welcome. That was it. No explanations. No technical details. No grand claims, just an invitation. The galactic community buzzed with curiosity and skepticism. Humans were announcing a technological demonstration. The same humans who had been rejected by the Council 18 months ago. The betting markets on gave it a 70% chance of being an embarrassing failure. But curiosity was a powerful thing. And in a galaxy where genuine innovation was rare, even the possibility of something new was worth investigating. Princess Nara heard about it from Lord during breakfast. She was reviewing economic reports, not really paying attention. The humans are hosting some kind of technology demonstration, said carefully. The Council is sending observers. Nara didn't look up from her data pad. It's on Gansu 4. That's where the engineer went, the one from the proposal. That got her attention. Nara looked up, frowning slightly. Which engineer? The one you critiqued during the infrastructure presentation. I believe his name was. Nara thought back. It took her a moment to remember. The quiet human who had collected his papers and left without arguing. She had assumed he went back to Earth or maybe took a position somewhere else. Why would he be on Gansu 4? There was nothing there. What kind of demonstration? She asked. They haven't said, just coordinates and a date. Paused. Your Highness, would you like to attend? I'm sure the Council would appreciate your perspective. Nara considered. It was probably nothing important, but she was curious about what the quiet human had been doing for 18 months. And if it was another flawed proposal, well, perhaps this time she could be gentler in her criticism. She had been young during that council session, perhaps a bit too harsh. Yes, prepare my ship. Let's see what the children have built. 14 days later, hundreds of ships gathered in orbit around Gansu 4. Every major empire sent representatives. Scientists, diplomats, military observers, journalists, everyone wanted to see what humanity had done. The moon's surface showed a massive ring structure, clearly visible from orbit. It was huge, easily 10 kilometers across, embedded partially in the rocky surface. Power readings were significant but not alarming. The structure hummed with energy that registering sensors couldn't quite identify. Nara's ship took position among the delegation vessels. She stood on the observation deck, looking down at the structure through the... It was impressive in scale, certainly. But what was it? Attention all visitors. The voice that came through all communication channels was calm and familiar, appeared on across hundreds of ships, his image crisp and clear. He looked older than Nara remembered. His face was leaner, marked by long hours of work, but his eyes were clear and focused. Thank you for coming. I'm lead engineer of this project. 18 months ago, humanity proposed an infrastructure system to the Galactic Council. That proposal was rejected, and the rejection was justified. Our approach was limited by conventional thinking. He paused and a slight smile crossed his face. So we stopped thinking conventionally. What you see below is a stable wormhole generator. We call it a gate. It creates an instantaneous connection between two distant points in space. No time dilation, no exotic matter requirements, no massive energy expenditure, just a direct link from here to there. Murmurs rippled through the gathered ships. Wormholes weren't new, several species had achieved them, but they were massive projects requiring enormous resources and could only connect fixed points. They were useful but limited. I'll demonstrate, continued, activating gate in 10 seconds. On the moon's surface, the ring structure began to glow. Energy readings spiked, but not to the levels expected for wormhole generation. The space inside the ring shimmered, rippled, and then tore open. A hole in reality, perfectly circular, perfectly stable. Through it, observers could see a completely different star system, the view as clear as looking through a window. That's the Helios system, said. 50,000 light-years from here. Travel time using standard jump drives, approximately 4 months. Travel time using the gate, instantaneous. A small probe drone launched from the moon's surface. It flew through the gate and appeared in the Helios system, sending back confirmation signals. Then it returned through the gate, completing the round trip in less than a minute. Silence from the gathered ships. Then chaos. Communication channels exploded with activity. Scientists demanding technical specifications. Military advisors calculating strategic implications. Diplomats trying to understand what this meant for galactic politics. Nara stared at the gate, her mind racing through the physics. This shouldn't be possible. The energy requirements for stable wormhole generation were enormous, but the readings showed power usage at a fraction of what it should be. How? Let the chaos continue for a few minutes before speaking again. I know you have questions. I'll answer them simply. Yes, it works. Yes, it's stable. Yes, humanity is prepared to share this technology with all council species freely. No patents, no licensing fees, no restrictions. We're providing the complete technical specifications to the Galactic Science Council within the hour. More chaos, free technology, humans were giving this away. We're building 4 more gates already, continued. Within 6 months, there will be a network of 10 gates connecting major systems. Within a year, 20. This isn't about humanity controlling travel. It's about making connection possible for everyone. A transmission came through from the flagship. Engineer, this is remarkable work. But how? The energy requirements alone should be impossible with your approach. We used different physics. His voice remained calm. Not better physics, just different. We approach the problem from angles that established science considers impractical or theoretical. We combined theories that are usually kept separate. We asked what if instead of why not. He pulled up technical diagrams that filled across the fleet. Dr. Park developed the core theory of nonlinear quantum field interaction, designed the structural architecture that could handle the stress, created new alloys that could channel the energy flows. This wasn't one person's work. It was collaboration between people who were told their ideas were impossible. Nara recognized some of the names: the physicist who had been rejected by the Science Council, the young engineer with no formal credentials, others she didn't know but could guess their stories, the dismissed, the overlooked, the too young or too unconventional. Had taken all of them and built something that would change everything. How long? Another transmission, this time from a military vessel. How long have you been planning this? Since the day I left. Since the moment I realized that trying to convince the galaxy of humanity's value was less productive than simply demonstrating it. He looked directly into the camera, and somehow it felt like he was looking at each observer individually. We're young. Princess Nara was correct about that. We've only been in space for 300 years. We don't have 50,000 years of accumulated knowledge, but being young means we don't know what's supposed to be impossible. We try things that older, wiser species already know won't work. Usually they're right. Sometimes we get lucky. Nara felt a strange sensation in her chest. He had named her, directly, not with anger, not with accusation, just a simple statement of fact. She had been correct about humanity being young, and he had used that youth as an advantage. The gates are humanity's gift to the galaxy, said. We hope they help everyone. Technical documentation is now available. Thank you for your time. His image disappeared from The gate remained active, a perfect circle opening to distant stars, impossible and real at the same time. Lord looked at Princess Nara. Her face was very still, very pale despite the crystalline shimmer of her skin. Your Highness. I need to think, she said quietly. Take us back to. As her ship turned away from Gansu 4, Nara watched the gate shrink in the human she had dismissed as too young, too inexperienced, too human, had just changed galactic civilization forever. And he had done it not to prove her wrong, but as if her opinion had never mattered at all. That was somehow worse than any revenge could have been. 3 months after the demonstration, the galaxy was still adjusting. Gate construction had begun in 12 systems simultaneously. Human engineering teams worked alongside alien scientists, sharing knowledge freely as promised. Trade routes that had taken months now took minutes. Military strategies became obsolete overnight. Economic models had to be completely rebuilt. The empire, despite its 50,000 years of technological advancement, found itself scrambling. Their transportation networks, refined over, were suddenly outdated. The younger species, humans, were leaping ahead because they adapted faster, their institutions less rigid, less bound by tradition. Princess Nara spent those 3 months in ways she never had before. She studied human scientific papers that had been rejected or ignored. She reviewed dissertation on nonlinear quantum fields, the one that had been laughed out of academic conferences. It was brilliant, revolutionary even. How had no one seen it? But she knew how, the same way she hadn't seen's potential, the same way the galactic establishment had dismissed humanity. They had looked at the source, young, unproven, unconventional, and stopped listening. She had done the same thing. She, who prided herself on her intelligence and objectivity, had fallen into the exact trap she would have criticized in others. Lord found her in the palace library late one night, surrounded by human research papers and technical documents. "Your Highness, you should rest. You've been studying for 16 hours straight." "Did you know humans have a saying?" Nara didn't look up from her reading. "They say, if you're the person in the room, you're in the wrong room. It means you should surround yourself with people who challenge you, who see things you don't." A wise saying. I've been in the wrong room my entire life. Everyone tells me I'm brilliant, that I'm a prodigy, that my papers are groundbreaking. But they're all working from the same foundation, the same assumptions, the same boundaries. Humans don't have those boundaries yet. That's not a weakness. It's a strength. She finally looked up at her advisor. "I need to speak with engineer, arrange a meeting." The request went through official channels. The response was polite but brief. "I appreciate the interest, but I'm currently focused on gate construction in the Helios sector. Perhaps in a few months when the schedule allows." Nara sent another request a week later. Again, a polite decline. He was training technicians. He was solving integration problems with existing infrastructure. He was always busy. She could have made it an official summons. She was a crown princess of the empire. He would have to respond. But something stopped her. Some instinct that forcing a meeting would only prove his point, that she still didn't understand. So she showed up at Gansu 4 unannounced. Her security detail objected strenuously. One didn't just drop in on industrial sites, but she overruled them and had her pilot request landing permission. The base security was surprisingly professional. They confirmed her identity, checked her credentials, and politely informed her that unscheduled visits weren't permitted. She would need to submit a formal request at least 48 hours in advance. Nara felt a flash of irritation. Didn't they know who she was? But then's voice came through the security comm. "It's fine, let her in, Bay 3. She found him in a workshop, calibrating components for another gate. He was wearing work clothes, his hands covered in machine oil. He looked tired. When he saw her, he simply nodded and continued his work. "Your Highness, what can I do for you?" The casual tone threw her off balance. Not disrespectful, but not deferential either. Just the tone of someone busy with work, talking to someone who had interrupted. "I wanted to apologize," she said. Looked up from his calibration. "For what?" "For what I said at the council. For dismissing your proposal without truly understanding it. For being arrogant and cruel." He put down his tools and wiped his hands on a cloth. "You weren't cruel. You were honest based on what you knew, and you were right about most of it. Our proposal did have flaws. Humanity is young. We do have a lot to learn. But I shouldn't have dismissed you so completely." "Maybe not, but it happened, and I moved on." He returned to his work. Was there something else? Nara felt confused. She had rehearsed this conversation in her mind dozens of times. He was supposed to be angry or satisfied at proving her wrong, or at least interested in her apology. Instead, he just seemed indifferent. "How did you do it?" she asked. "The gates, how did you see what no one else saw?" "I listened to people no one else would listen to." Theories were rejected because she didn't fit the traditional academic mold. Designs were ignored because she had no credentials, but they were right. They just needed someone to believe them. "But you designed the integration systems. You made it all work together." Shrugged, I'm good at seeing how pieces fit together. That's not genius. That's just practice and patience. Don't diminish what you did. I'm not. He looked at her directly. I'm just not making it about you. This wasn't about proving Princess Nara wrong. It wasn't about getting revenge or recognition. It was about building something that needed to exist. You were just a moment that made me realize I was wasting time trying to convince people who weren't ready to listen. The words weren't meant to hurt, but they did. Nara had come expecting anger she could address or pride she could acknowledge. Instead, she got indifference. She had mattered so little that he had simply stepped around her and continued working. "Do you hate me?" she asked quietly. Looked genuinely confused by the question. "Hate you? No, why would I? You were 19 years old, speaking from the only experience you'd been taught. You thought you were helping. You weren't trying to be cruel. You were just limited by your own assumptions. We all are. But I hurt you. You hurt my pride maybe for about an hour. Then I realized my pride wasn't important. The work was important." He returned to his calibration. "Your Highness, I don't mean to be rude, but I have 4 more components to calibrate before the shift ends. Was there something specific you needed?" Nara stood there feeling lost. She had expected confrontation, resolution, something. Instead, she got a busy engineer treating her like an interruption. Not with hostility, just with the polite indifference of someone who had moved on completely. "I've been studying human approaches to science," she said. "Trying to understand how you think differently. I'd like to collaborate if you're willing. Not because I pity you or want to fix what I did, because I think working together could produce something valuable." Paused in his work. He looked at her carefully as if seeing her for the first time. "That's a different question. Let me think about it. Gate construction is going to occupy most of my time for the next 6 months. But after that, maybe. If you're genuinely interested in the work and not in making yourself feel better about the past." "It's about the work," Nara said firmly. "Then we'll talk after the initial network is complete. Send me your current research. I'll read it and we can discuss possibilities." He glanced at a chronometer. "I really do need to finish these calibrations." Nara recognized a dismissal. She nodded and turned to leave, then paused at the workshop door. "For what it's worth, what you've built is the most impressive thing I've seen in my lifetime, and I'm sorry I didn't see your potential when it mattered." "It mattered when I needed it to matter," said without looking up. "That's all any of us can ask for." She left Gansu 4 feeling strange. Not satisfied, not resolved, just aware that the universe didn't revolve around her actions and their consequences. Had been hurt, had been dismissed, and had simply found another path. He had built something extraordinary not because of her or in spite of her, but entirely separate from her. Lord asked her on the journey back how it went. "I don't know," Nara admitted. "I apologized, he accepted it, and somehow that feels worse than if he had been angry." "Why worse?" "Because anger would mean I mattered to him. What I did would have weight in his story. Instead, I'm just a footnote, a brief obstacle he stepped around and forgot about." She looked out at the stars streaming past. "I think that's what humans mean when they say someone moves on. Not forgiveness, not forgetting, just making it irrelevant." She spent the flight back writing a message to the Galactic Science Council. She proposed a complete review of their paper submission process, their criteria for evaluating new theories, their approach to unconventional thinking. She knew it would face resistance. The old ways were comfortable. But comfort had almost made them miss the biggest breakthrough in 10,000 years. That was worth fighting against. 2 years after the humiliation that started everything, stood on the observation deck of the gate station. Through the windows, he could see Earth in the distance, blue and green and alive. 23 gates now connected the major systems of known space. 60 more were under construction. Travel that had taken months now took minutes. The galaxy was smaller, more connected, more alive. He had stepped back from gate construction 6 months ago, leaving it in the capable hands of and her expanded team. He was tired of the spotlight, tired of being humanity's symbol. He wanted to return to what he loved, building things that helped people. Now he worked on environmental restoration projects. Dead worlds brought back to life through careful engineering and patience. It was slow work, unglamorous work, but it mattered. Princess Nara, now 21, had changed too. She still advised the Galactic Council on technical matters, but her approach was different. She questioned assumptions, sought out unconventional ideas, and pushed her own people to think beyond their established boundaries. She had revolutionized science not by introducing entirely new theories, but by showing how to combine human adaptability with precision. Her papers on hybrid methodologies had won her respect even from those who resisted change. She was no longer just a young prodigy. She was becoming a bridge between the old ways and the new. The crisis began with routine stellar observations. A star in the Talon sector, surrounded by 3 inhabited worlds, was behaving strangely. Energy fluctuations, unusual radiation patterns. The predictions were grim. Within 18 months, the star would produce a solar flare large enough to sterilize all 3 planets. Evacuating 3 worlds was theoretically possible with the Gate network, but the populations were massive, over 40 billion people combined. The logistics were nightmarish, and even if they could evacuate everyone, where would they go? The Galactic Council called an emergency session. Scientists from every species gathered to find a solution. They needed to stabilize the star or redirect its energy somehow. But no one had ever attempted stellar engineering on this scale. The energy requirements, the precision needed, the risk of making things worse, it seemed impossible. Received the official request 3 days into the crisis. The Council needed humanity's innovative thinking. They needed someone who didn't know what was impossible. He almost declined. This wasn't his area of expertise. But then he saw the population numbers, the children who would die if they couldn't find a solution. That mattered more than his comfort. He accepted on one condition: Princess Nara would be part of the team. Her computational abilities were unmatched, and this problem would need both human innovation and precision. Their first meeting was over secured comm channels, professional and distant. Nara presented the analysis, detailed models of the star's behavior, predictions of the flare, calculations of what would be needed to stabilize it. The numbers were staggering. Listened quietly, then asked, "What if we don't try to stabilize it?" Silence on the channel, then Nara's voice careful, "Explain. Every solution focuses on fixing the star, but stars do this naturally. We can't stop physics. What if we redirect the energy instead? Create a controlled pathway for the flare to release safely. That would require building structures that could channel stellar-level energy. The materials alone exist. Alloys from the Gate project can handle high-energy plasma, and field theory could create containment boundaries. We wouldn't stop the flare, we'd guide it." Nara was quiet for a long moment. He could almost hear her thinking, her mind racing through calculations. That's insane. The precision required would be, but it might work. It actually might work. They assembled a team: human engineers, scientists, materials experts, 20 of the best minds from different species, all working toward one goal. The timeline was brutal. They had 16 months to design, build, and deploy a system that had never been attempted before. And Nara found themselves working together daily, then constantly. Their approaches complemented each other. She would identify the theoretical requirements, calculate the mathematics with perfect precision. He would find practical solutions, ways to achieve what theory demanded with the resources available. In the 3rd month, during a particularly difficult problem with energy dispersion, they stayed up for 32 hours straight. Coffee and stimulants kept them going. At hour 28, Nara made an error in her calculations, something that almost never happened. caught it, corrected it gently. She stared at the numbers, embarrassed. I'm sorry, I should have. You're tired, we both are, take a break. We don't have time for breaks. We don't have time for mistakes either. He stood and stretched. Come on, 30 minutes, food and fresh air. They ended up in the station's observation lounge, eating recycled protein bars and looking at Earth. The silence between them was comfortable now, not the awkward tension of their first meetings. I've been wanting to say something, Nara said quietly. Back when we first started working together, you said to ask you after the gates were complete. I never did. I was afraid you'd still see me as the arrogant princess who humiliated you. Took a bite of his protein bar, considering. I told you then I didn't hate you. I still don't. But I was terrible to you. You were 19 and brilliant and told you were special your entire life. You had no reason to think differently. He looked at her directly. But you learned. That matters more than the mistake. Did you ever doubt yourself after what I said? For about an hour, yes. Then I realized something. Your opinion of me only mattered if I let it matter, and I had work to do that was more important than anyone's opinion. Nara smiled slightly. That's very human. Most species would carry that grudge forever. Maybe that's our advantage. We forget to hold grudges because we're too busy moving forward. They returned to work refreshed. The solution came together piece by piece. Massive energy collectors in solar orbit, field generators using theories, structural supports from alloys, all controlled by computational systems that could adjust in microseconds. With 2 months remaining, they began construction. Hundreds of ships, thousands of workers, all coordinated through the gate network. It was the largest collaborative engineering project in galactic history. Princess Nara worked from the command ship, managing computational systems and real-time adjustments, was on the construction site itself, solving problems as they emerged. They communicated constantly, their working relationship now seamless. The day the flare was predicted arrived. The 3 worlds below had been partially evacuated as a precaution, but most of the population remained, trusting the system that had been built above their star. And Nara watched from separate locations as the star began its eruption. The flare emerged as predicted, massive and deadly. The energy collectors activated, channeling the plasma through carefully designed pathways. Field generators created boundaries that guided the energy away from the inhabited worlds. For 6 hours, they held their breath as stellar fire was controlled and redirected. The system strained but held. The numbers stayed within acceptable ranges. The fields maintained integrity. When it was over, 3 worlds remained safe. The star settled into stable patterns. 40 billion people would see tomorrow because the system worked. Collapsed in his quarters, exhausted beyond measure, he slept for 16 hours straight. When he woke, there was a message from Nara. We should talk, in person this time. They met on neutral ground, a small station between their respective territories. No delegations, no advisors, just 2 people who had worked together to save billions of lives. Nara looked different somehow. Still young, still brilliant, but with something else now. Humility, maybe, or wisdom earned through experience. I wanted to thank you, she said, not just for the stellar project, for teaching me something important. What's that? That being right isn't the same as being wise. I was right that humanity was young, but I was unwise in thinking that youth was only a limitation. You showed me it could be a strength. Smiled, and you showed me that age and experience have their own value. Your computational system saved those worlds as much as our engineering did. We needed both. I've been thinking about what you said, about how I was just a footnote in your story. That bothered me for a long time. I'm sorry if... She held up a hand. No, it was true, and it needed to be true. I had to stop being the center of my own universe to see how much bigger the actual universe was. You did me a favor by not making me important to your story. You're important now, said honestly. As a colleague, as someone I respect and trust to do incredible work. That's better than being important as someone who hurt me once. They talked for hours about future projects, about ways human adaptability and precision could complement each other, about the dozens of problems that needed solving across the galaxy, about building things that mattered. As Nara prepared to leave, she paused. If we had met differently, if I hadn't been so arrogant at that council session, do you think we could have worked together then? Considered the question seriously. No, you needed to be who you were then to become who you are now, and I needed to be dismissed to learn that external validation doesn't matter. We both grew into people who could do this work together. The path was necessary, even if it was painful. 6 months later, Ambassador Minu visited at his latest project site, bringing life to a dead world through atmospheric processors and biological seeding. The old diplomat looked at his former with pride. The council wants to give you a medal, humanitarian award for the stellar project. Didn't look up from his work. Tell them to give it to the team. I don't need medals. You never did. Minu sat on a rock watching adjust an atmospheric processor. You proved them wrong, you know, everyone who dismissed humanity. I didn't prove them wrong, I proved us right. There's a difference. What difference? Proving someone wrong is about them. Proving yourself right is about you. I was never interested in them, just in the work. Minu laughed. That's the most human thing I've ever heard. We're too busy building the future to worry about the past. Something like that. As the sun set on the slowly awakening world, allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Not for proving anyone wrong, not for the recognition, but for the simple fact that he had built something good. He had taken hurt and turned it into purpose. He had taken dismissal and turned it into determination. And somewhere across the galaxy, Princess Nara was doing the same, taking her mistakes and turning them into wisdom, her arrogance into adaptability, her brilliance into collaboration. They would work together again. There were too many problems that needed solving, too many worlds that needed help. But it wouldn't be about their past. It would be about their future, and the future of everyone who needed what they could build together. The galaxy was smaller now, more connected, because someone had walked away from humiliation and chosen to build bridges instead of walls. That was humanity's gift, not superior technology or greater intelligence, but the simple refusal to let setbacks define them. They fell down, they got back up, they built something better, and they kept moving forward, always forward into a future they created with their own hands.